Hi there. Today we're going to discuss the first steps of creating a new story-based campaign from scratch. I'm JW the DM and welcome to my channel. If you weren't here for the last video where I essentially just went over the reasons why you shouldn't write everything out about your campaign and world first, the short version is you shouldn't do it because it's so much work you'll possibly never get around to hosting a game there. It'll probably burn you out, and you'll likely railroad your players too much. For more detail, click on the link here or in the description below. As for today, I'm going to give my advice on what you should do instead. But first, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that bell icon until it says all. Now, I know that you're really wanting to create a story with a plot, and that's where we're going to start. Now, we won't emphasize too much story yet. Remember, this is a collaborative game, and the story ideally should be co-created between you and the players. However, the general overall plot can still be laid down by you, the DM. As you might have noticed from that wording, I said general and overall. At this stage of the game, and because you don't already know what all directions your players will choose to take and to get from the beginning of the game to the end, you don't want to have anything but the beginning and the end really figured out for your plot. Of course, you'll know a few important milestones and NPCs and such to be encountered between these 2 points, but you want a lot of flexibility and spontaneity allowed for when those happen and the gigantic middle of the campaign in general. Before I get to how we start this process, I want you to know that we're going to create an outline that has a decent amount of detail at the very end and the majority of detail at the very beginning. There will be some detail for NPCs and maybe an event or two in the space between the very beginning and the end, but we'll be leaving that mostly in flux. Now, I will say, how much world building you do during this time is up to you, but I'd emphasize first doing the world building that enables you to run your first 1 to 3 sessions and then something that justifies the ending. But we'll come to that. Now, the start, and we're starting with the end. Why the end of the campaign? Because we always want to know where we're trying to direct things to. If you have a table that is on board with defeating a BBEG at some point in time and more or less following a plot, then you need to know where it's likely to end. This will also inform you on what MacGuffins will need to be attained, what NPCs and monsters might figure in a big deal, and what the quest that happened to get there will be all about. So make a list or diagram showing the following. The BBEG, their weaknesses and strengths, the BBEG's master plan, and then quickly sketch out the answers to these questions. What will happen if they succeed, the bad guy? And this might be different from what they intended. For example, in my current main campaign, Stop Watching My Players, the BBEG thinks he's just going to make many planes into an icy, emotionless place, but in reality, if he succeeds, he'll end the multiverse. What will happen if only parts of that plan succeed? Will there be wars between kingdoms or devastation of entire forests or something? Does the BBEG require a MacGuffin to make his plan succeed? For example, the Emperor in Star Wars wanted 2 things, a working Death Star and to make Luke Skywalker his new apprentice, to supplant his father, the half-mechanical Vader. What MacGuffin or MacGuffins might the PCs need to overthrow the BBEG's plans? Remember, a MacGuffin doesn't have to be an object. It can also be information or attainment of a spiritual state or whatever. But yeah, it's usually an object, like the Rod of 7 parts and all that. And if you're particularly new to D&D, Google that. Where is the most likely place where the BBEG will make his plan successfully happen? And finally answer, what do you have planned for the PCs to do to stop this threat? Notice I said planned, not know. Now, That's already a lot of stuff, but you need to know it, and I'll give you an example why it's so important in a second. But first, you need to know that all of this may get thrown out. There is a chance that both you and the players will find something that happens in the playing of the campaign that is more compelling than what you have planned beforehand. And if this happens, that's perfectly okay. It's not a bad thing. Run with it. Redo your outline with the new information at hand. I've done this. Many DMs have done this. We don't want to be so tied to our planned adventure that we take away any chance that the game can be more fun than if it followed our plans. But this is a discussion for when I talk about what happens in the middle of our outline. Right this minute, though, I'm going to share with you why it's so important to know an ending. Notice I didn't say the ending, for when you're figuring out the rest of your outline. If you're between 13 and 40, I apologize if you're not familiar with this example. When George Lucas started filming Star Wars, he had an ending in mind. The script wasn't even remotely what the final script for Episode 4 was going to be when the cameras started rolling. But he'd known for a while what he envisioned would be the likely endpoint of a trilogy if this movie was successful enough to let him make sequels. That ending changed a lot even before shooting began, changing from draft to draft to draft of the script. And it changed after Star Wars, or Episode 4 A New Hope for you youngins, was shot. It changed during the making of The Empire Strikes Back. But George always had an ending in mind so that he and Lawrence Kasdan, the writer of The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, always had a destination to direct the story to. Contrasting with that with the sequel trilogy, J.J. Abrams didn't learn from his mistakes from making Lost. Lost, the TV show, notoriously built up this great lore, but there was no actual ending in mind, and when it came time to end the show, spoiler alert, they kind of had to kludge together a last-minute story that all the characters had actually died and were in the afterlife, and it didn't work. And in the Star Wars sequel trilogy, there was no or very little thought put to how the trilogy should end when they made the first movie and the second movie. When they brought in a new director and writer for the second one, they let him go crazy with no thought to how the trilogy was planned to end at that time. And it was too late by the time they made that third movie, Rise of Skywalker. JJ had to kludge once again, an ending that was not satisfying in the least. So, even though your ending has a high likelihood of changing, I think it's imperative that you have one in mind and in your outline. It doesn't have to be in great detail, just a sentence about the climactic confrontation or something, but there should be one there. So, this is the information to have at the end of your outline. The BBEG, the master plan, how to thwart the BBEG's plan, where it might be completed, where it'll come to fruition. This is where I'm going to leave you today. Now, you now know what to do to make an ending point for your campaign, and we're going to work backwards. And in the next video, I'll tell you what to do about the vast middle of your outline and, time allowing, help you set up your first session of this campaign. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and you'll find a link to my Discord below, which, I'll admit, doesn't have a ton of people in there yet, but I plan to have a thriving community there to discuss all things supporting DMs and GMs. In the meantime, may all your games be full of glory. Till next time.